"You're like a sister to me," Winter murmured happily through the vents, and Catalina smiled in her cell. She didn't smile much, but talking to Winter usually dragged the expression out of her. Catalina ran a hand through the side of her dark hair and sighed when she realized she had slipped. She felt the same for Winter, and Jamie for that matter. Cole, Nicholas, and Joshua were like brothers to her, as they were all in this hell together. "I feel the same," she replied to Winter, and the two continued their conversation as Nicholas sat stewing in his own cell. The young man was twiddling his thumbs and rocking back and forth as he thought about only two things: vengeance and escape. When he wasn't dreaming of alternate realities, Nicholas was imagining every which way he could dismember Evan. His hatred for the vile, beautiful demon was only growing as the days counted. Although his most recent dream, where he had watched a room full of psychics die at the hands of an unknown attacker, had not left the back of his mind. He couldn't make heads or tails of it, as he had no previous knowledge of a foul earth that invaded others. In the next cell over, Joshua was laying in bed, weeping. He couldn't bring himself to get up, as he was still shaken by Evan's last words. Despite having been told a week ago that Evan may pay a visit to his mother, Joshua had not ceased his worrying. His insides were racked with stress and grief as he tried to cover his head with a blanket. But nothing could hide the boy from his deepest fears. Had Evan already seen his mother? Or was he even going to visit her at all? Joshua pondered the horrors until he couldn't keep his eyes open, and eventually he fell asleep, falling prey to whatever he would witness while under. Dr. Phillips was at his desk, rewatching one of the most recent recordings. Cole had recently witnessed a world immersed in a terribly unimaginable war. An alien race that called themselves the Fixians had invaded the Earth in full force, and mankind was fighting a war for their lives. The war had been raging for nearly 5 years since the year 2015, and not one town, village, or city was left untouched. Nearly every human being alive on the planet had been uprooted and forced to live a nomadic lifestyle. Soldiers were housed in the partially ruined homes of the dead, and the end of conflict appeared to be nowhere in sight. In the last year, the war had become a desperate stalemate, with both sides having reached the point of utter and total exhaustion. The stalemate had only been reached when the psychics of the world decided to reveal themselves and bring their abilities to the front lines. They decimated the invading creatures and turned the tide at the last moment, saving millions of lives. Cole was one of these psychic soldiers, but because he was only a dreamer, he could only fight as hard as any ordinary man. Nonetheless, his instincts from being a police officer and semi-professional cage fighter had brought him a long way in the battle. Dr. Phillips watched as the alternate Cole and many others had taken back territory in the Midwest, driving the Fixians back into the sky or closer to the coast. Many lives were lost in the effort, but Cole and his best friend, Leon, another psychic, had shined in the fight and led the charge against their enemy. Back in the other world, Dr. Phillips made a mental note to find Leon and bring him to the facility. On many worlds, Cole seemed to be close to a man named Leon, who was a psychic capable of more than a simple dreamer. Leon could perform astral projection, meaning that he could leave his body and become a spirit. This gave him the capability of traveling through danger and delivering terrifying chaos to the enemy. He horrified them as a ghost and even led them to attacking one another, creating great loss on their side. The invaders had not anticipated that there were such beings on planet Earth, leaving them to scramble and retreat in the face of psychics everywhere. It had been long enough. Dr. Phillips wanted to get his hands on Leon, who must have existed in this world as well. He had tried to inquire the Cole of this Earth about Leon, but to no avail. Cole was either lying or more than likely he had never encountered his best friend in this reality. Dr. Phillips reached to the left and grabbed his radio so that he could contact Evan and ask about his recent findings. "Evan," the old man called to his protege, "what is your status on the information I've sent you to find?" When there was no answer, the doctor frowned, but then the door to his office opened, and the man himself stepped through. Evan looked exhausted, and from the look on his face, angry. He limped forward and found a chair, sitting himself a few feet away from Dr. Phillips. His blonde hair was dirty and roughed up, as sweat was caked on his forehead. With a sigh, he bowed his head and waited for the doctor to speak first. "Evan?" Dr. Phillips greeted him dryly. "Doctor," the young man replied stiffly, and he glanced up so that they could lock eyes. "Anything to report?" Evan snorted and then pointed to his leg, which was shaking slightly and still bleeding. "Christ!" Dr. Phillips said with a disgusted look on his face as he looked at the bullet wound in Evan's leg. "What happened to you, Evan?" "The therapist," Evan grunted as he tore his pant leg and attempted to wrap the wound. The doctor raised an eyebrow as he asked, "The therapist? Oh, you mean Autumn Walker?" "Yeah," Evan snorted as he finished up. "That one. The bitch shot me in the leg." "You approached her?" Dr. Phillips gasped and Evan nodded. "I found a perfect opportunity to capture her in the parking lot," Evan lied. "She caught me off guard and actually fought back. She shot my leg and then knocked me unconscious. When I awoke, she was long gone, and her apartment hasn't been visited either, meaning that she has some indication of why I was after her. I doubt we will be seeing her again anytime soon." Dr. Phillips thought this over for a moment, carefully processing every word that left Evan's tongue. After a quick glance at Evan's current state and his impressive physique, the doctor made a mental note that it was highly unlikely a middle-aged woman could knock him unconscious so easily. But this wasn't a conversation he should have with the young man, as it was bound to bring unnecessary tension to the surface. Instead, Dr. Phillips decided to change the subject and ask him about something else. "Have you discovered anything regarding the infinity tattoo that I asked you to look into?" the doctor asked, and the young man shrugged. "Ugh, nothing but dead ends," Evan grunted again. "Any information of the tattoo doesn't hold significance, at least in this reality." Dr. Phillips slowly nodded, hiding his disappointment. He reached over and grabbed a small notepad from his desk where he kept his reminders and personal notes. He knew that he had to be overly cautious when dealing with Evan, so he simply took a note or two on his pad and then took a deep breath. The old man was growing tired, more so than he had ever anticipated he could be. The life he was leading had been an intensely lonely one, so much so that he had never formed any true bonds with anyone beyond his adoptive parents. "Sir," Evan said with a grim look on his face. "What is it, Evan?" "May I request a unit of soldiers to help me pursue Autumn Walker?" Evan asked, concealing his eagerness. He wanted to ensure that he captured Eugene before the doctor even discovered he existed. Killing the therapist would only be sweet, deserving revenge. To Evan's dismay, however, the doctor calmly shook his head. "Not at the moment," he answered, frustrating Evan more than he knew. "The woman can wait for now. I am sure you're right, and she will be hard to find at this point. We have revealed ourselves, and she will surely go to any length to hide herself from us. For now, I have a third assignment for you." "Oh?" Evan murmured, raising a curious eyebrow. "What is it?" "There is another psychic I want you to search for," Dr. Phillips began to explain. "His name is Leon, and he is different from the dreamers we have studied in the past. he is capable of astral projection, revealing that dreamers are only the tip of the iceberg in our work. I can show you what he looks like based on images from Cole's recent dream. He is now our top priority. Do you understand? Evan was hesitant for a moment as he considered killing the doctor here and now. For some reason, on this particular world, he could not read the old man's mind, as he had done to so many of his alternates. He had never intended for Dr. Phillips to learn so much about the other, more powerful psychics. He knew that before too long, he would have to slay yet another version of the old man. Yes, Evan said with a nod. I understand. Nicholas was sitting on the floor in his cell, contemplating his next move. It was currently 3 a.m, and his mind would simply not stop. Over and over, he ran through a plan he recently come up with. All he would need to do is successfully obtain a key card for someone working in the facility, and he would have access to all the locked-down doors. His determination was unbreakable, and he would kill anyone that dared to get in his way. Time was all he needed, and the young prisoner had an abundance of it.